So welcome everybody to the International Workshop on Environmental Sustainability and Education, which we are host together, Oren Pizmoni Levy from the Center for Sustainable Future, Teachers College, Columbia University, and me, Daphne Gan, the Israel Institute of Education for Sustainability from the Kibbutzim College of Education, Technology and the Arts. And we are very, very happy to be here, the third session. Oh, it's written here season 1, but we are in the third. I thought I did change that. It's a second meeting in the third session, and it's a very, very interesting collaboration between the Teachers College and the Kibbutzim College, because we found every time that we are expanded our network and our people that we are inviting to our workshop, and we find that every time there are people that are coming back again and again, which is very, very nice, and there are new people. So it's always the combination between new people, people that we know, people that are coming from time to time, and it's really a nice opportunity for discussion about education for sustainability. Just to remind about the upcoming session, which will be November 2nd, the topic will be, we will notice about the topic, and to let you know that if you're interested in sharing your work at our workshop, we will be very happy. Just email me or Oren, and you are more than welcome. And I will jump directly to our session today. So we're very happy to have here Thomas Hoffman, which I will say something about his bio, and then I will give you the stage, Thomas. So Thomas lives in, and sorry for the pronunciation, probably I will not say it right, but so he lives in Baden-Württemberg, the southern state of Germany, and works as head of geography department at the Teacher Training Center Karlsruhe, where he trains pre-service geography teachers for secondary schools. Beside this, he is honorary professor for education for sustainable development at Leuphana University in Nuremberg, as well as lecturer for geography directives as Karlsruhe Institute for Technology. Thomas also teaches geography, history, political science, and economy at Wintec Gymnasium in Bull next the Black Forest. With his interest in global challenges for several decades, he started to deal with ideas of education for sustainable development and global learning right from the beginning of the discussion in the 90s. He has introduced these ideas into numerous geodidactic articles as well as geography textbooks. Thomas is one of the founding members of the ESD ExpertNet, an intercultural think tank on ESD, in which he heads the working group on the development of learning and teaching material. So we are very pleased to have you, Thomas. And we will start from your presentation, and then we will have some Q&A, and then we will get to have a nice discussion in small groups, and we'll come back to discuss what we have learned together.
Thank you very much, Daphne. I just need a short feedback whether everything is to be seen.
Yeah.
And technically fine. Is it like that?
Yes.
Then I can go on. So also from my side, welcome to this little presentation, which will be around the question how to teach global challenges like climate change. It will be in the focus, but not only. And what I would like to present is another approach of teaching, which I developed in recent years and which I would like to offer you for discussion. So let's start with some thoughts about global challenges. I do not read them out. You can do that on your own. I just click them here so so that they do appear, and would like to just to say that this kind of a kind of additional understanding of global challenges is what is most transferred and discussed in the media, in school books, in textbooks, but even at university, it often ends in a kind of additional understanding. That is not really right. What we definitely do have to understand that in between these various global challenges, there are interlinkages which strengthen each other, sometimes strengthen each other or even cause each other, so that the real situation in which we do find ourselves is a kind of network of global challenges, which requires a minimum of systems thinking, and that is therefore one of the core elements and the core efforts to be dealt with in the context of ESD. The question is, how far are we? And if we look to the newest book by Johan Rockström, he titled his book last year Breaking Boundaries, referring on the model of the planetary boundaries, which have been developed in 2014 and the following years by the Stockholm Resilience Center under his guidance. In case that there is some need to discuss these things, we can do that afterwards. Here it is just to demonstrate the frame in which I'm going to move today. So the question is, what do educational institutions in knowledge or in knowing these developments, and how is the reaction? The recent reaction for this decade, for the 2020s, and with a goal of 2030 is ESD for 2030. And if we could have a closer look into this program, UNESCO named it, we do have sustainable development as a whole, as the base of all educational efforts, and within these, and that is what you do see here in the translated version, we should have a very clear focus on transformative action, on structural changes, and on technological futures. That means that we have a clear kind of program of focus, which is to be dealt with, and which is the kind of reflection background on how we deal with the SDGs. Having this in a base, we could ask, and we do have to ask and should ask, are we doing this? I would like to have a short look into some geography didactic magazines and the topic of climate change. I analyzed about 60, 70 articles and tried to place them into a structure which says, is it more a local approach or more a global one? And is it more solution or problem focused? And according to the idea, to the suggestion of how to teach climate change in schools, I made dots in this frame. The result of all this is looks like this. That means that we do have solution focused teaching approaches on all spatial dimensions. But if you compare it to the problem-focused ones, they are definitely in the minority. That means from this analysis of articles, we can definitely say, okay, obviously we are teaching more problem-oriented or more problem-focused. You can extend this idea and integrate also what I did here with the main geography textbooks in our schools here in Germany. And if you do the same thing like this, the different size of these small squares depend on how many pages in the school book deal with the topic of climate change. But again, you see that there is a clear majority of problem-focused articles, and if you combine both of them, you come into a ratio of 1 to 3. So what we can definitely say, we do obviously teach climate change topics much more problem-focused than solution focused. And this we could, this short or intermediate summary, we could extend about the question, how do we teach future related topics? To answer this, I would like to show you two textbooks and two examples of textbooks. One is Geography, a German textbook for the higher classes 11 and 12. And if you as a student, you are 16, 17 years old when you deal with this book, by example, you will find the following page. I translated the headline for you, which means the future of our Earth. That means that if you see the whole thing and if you perceive the whole message of this double page, as a young person, you will think, okay, what is my future? What is my life? Do I definitely have a choice whether I would like to die due to thirst or whether I'm overrolled by a car or whatever? What is the quality of my life? If the specialists say this is the future of our Earth, and the thing which really brought me up and motivated me to develop a totally different teaching approach was that there was not even a question mark. That means it was a clear message into this. This book is about 15 to 18 years back, but still, if we look to a very new one, which has recently been published and is in practice right now, you will find a page like that. The headline on the upper left side reads, Human in System Earth. And the message is that humans are somehow out of it. Otherwise, it would not be possible to put your footprint in that negative way to the globe. And that means, again, there are not as harsh as it was in the earlier example, but still there is obviously a kind of tradition which worries me quite a lot. So we can summarize here that we definitely or obviously do have a kind of teaching culture where we add problem after problem after problem, whether it is the rising of the sea level, whether it is the question of droughts, whether it is the question of urbanization or of plastic pollutions on Henderson Island, which what this fourth example says. And then at the end of these problems, somebody says, okay, there is obviously also an approach of sustainable development, sorry, but there is hardly any time to deal with that. Let's rush to the next problem. That is the teaching reality in many schools, and for sure not only in Germany, as I try to find out and analyzed also for Japan, by example, for India, and even for the US big school book on geography. No wonder what we do find in our papers cartoons like these, that the kids or the youth says, may I sleep between you? Again, I dreamt about my future and the future which we communicate to our youngs. That is not, that is really a big problem and a huge issue. So to bring it into a more abstract or theoretic point, obviously we had a teaching approach which you could name problem focused teaching approach, dealing exclusively with the problem without anything. In recent years, we definitely watch that there has been changes, and that is good, towards a problem solving teaching approach. And the arrow signals you that this solution access, which is at the end of the hour or of the teaching time, might even take some more time. But still, it is a way that is started with problems and not and therefore is definitely very sorrowful. That leads me to the general question: is there no better way? And for doing this, we have a very short excursion into another time, into another field, but which is very enlightening for us. So I would like to ask you for a very short moment to imagine that Martin Luther King would have said, I have a nightmare, you immediately understand that his speech would never have been worked, would never have been motivated. He knew that. He said, I have a dream. And if we have this insight, what psychology in this context means, and if we again combine this with the idea that these global challenges, as I showed them to you in the beginning of my little presentation, finally only mirror the SDGs. So here to the left, you do have the global challenges expressed in the SDGs. You have the goals, what you would like to arrive to achieve to overcome these global challenges. Then we are in the combination of both in another starting point from where we could try and ask, can we reach more by using a solution-focused approach? You see, it is still a kind of suggestion. It is not yet empirically proved. There are studies going on recently, but let's discuss about this and see where it might go. I would like to give you 2 or 3 examples. That depends a bit on the time I have left. We are going to start with climate action. So for a very short moment, I would like to ask you to remember what you saw, what you experienced in teaching in your various professional fields. And you will not be surprised that many hours and lessons on climate change starts with pictures like this one. You see, it is a fake picture that never exists like this, but it is the signal of emotional approach towards the animal, the polar bear, and the vanishing ice. Or if you give it even a step harder, you might come to pictures like that. That is what I watched many times. That is the first picture, the first step into a topic like climate change. And now imagine or try to bring yourself into the perception of a 15, 16, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old person. What is his or her perception of this? What is the transfer to his own life? What is the message which we do transfer with this? And that is very obviously extremely negative and not really motivating for one's own life. And now try to imagine that the same lesson does not start with a picture of a polar bear as I showed you, but starts with a picture like that. So Owen probably recognizes immediately his hometown, while others are still asking themselves, what the hell is that thing up there? I will give you some advice or some help. That is Impulse 2, the first solar-driven aircraft which surrounded the Earth, and this is flying at night over Manhattan. And again, ask yourself, what is the question of your students? 15, 16, 17 years old. The reaction is always the same. I tested that, I don't know, 20 times, 25 times. It is always the same. Wow, how is that possible? That means that the starting emotion and the psychological trace they are on is from the very beginning in a very positive mood. They are interested in saying, oh, what is this? What is happening there? Why do they do this? How does it work? And so on, and all these things. But this you do have to combine with a kind of thesis. So by example, there's somebody who says this situation, this aircraft solves the climate change issue. And then we come into the discussion, is that right? We do have to check whether this is really a kind of solution or whether it's only a nice idea. And that you do, of course, you do have to combine with real data. You do not have to minimize the problem. You do not have to neglect the problem at all, but your focus is and the focus is content-wise as well as time-wise, very much concentrated on the discussion and the proof, not the proof, the check of the solution and its quality and the problem you deal with only as long as until you understood it in detail. That is enough and no longer. So the questions which might come up here is the idea transferable? Are solar-powered aircraft suitable for intercontinental air connections? And you start from here on. What are recent developments? Where are frontiers? Where are hurdles to be taken? And even if you come to a situation where you cannot imagine, maybe just for a short moment, we try to imagine or we try to remember that in 1891, which is not that long back, Otto Lilienthal and his first attempts to jump down that hill with his Derwitzer apparat, or even only some years later, only a decade later, Wright's first attempts to fly, which looked very much professional already. At that time, nobody, definitely nobody, had any idea, not even a glance of an idea, that something like this would ever be possible, an A380 with more than 800 passengers reaching around the world in one step. So this we should also take into account. I would like to give you a second example and probably skip the third one. So this time we deal with number 15, life on land, and it is connected to climate change, the question of clearing the rainforests. Again, if you try to imagine what is going on in this case, we will probably have pictures like this in our imagination or experience of teaching. And now again, try to imagine when it starts like this. And somebody says, this is the solution of avoiding the further clearing of tropical rainforests. Of course, we have to come closer and see that the whole field is covered with dandelion. And everybody who has a slight idea about agriculture knows that the farmer usually has to be very unhappy finding his fields covered by dandelion. But nevertheless, there is somebody who says this, and we do have to, it is under this sign here, we have to question, is that right? Does this work? How is the idea? And here we come, here we come to the inside, that the liquid which is inside the dandelion plant is very much is a relative to the traditional rubber plant, which we do harvest in the tropical areas. And now the last, or the German Future Award 2021 went to Professor Reker and her team, who succeeded in getting the Russian version of the dandelion from a natural 2 to 3% of content of rubber to a 15 to 18% of rubber content within the plant. And that it is not only a theoretical aspect, but we are for some time already not only in the production of rubber out of dandelion, as you see on the bottom right picture, but we are already in the production of tires for bicycles, and also the first tires for cars have been produced. So that gives you the idea, okay, if this works, is it really the solution to stop the further clearing of the rainforests, what you do see in the background of this picture, in favor of an extension of rubber plantations? Is this the solution? And you will find a lot of arguments which I could report in more detail later on if you are interested. And again, we put the question, the discussion on the solution into the center of our teaching efforts, and therefore have the students for the full time, I skip this thing, for a full time in the right mood of concentration. So you will not be.
Thomas, you can take the time to give the third example. We'll take 5 minutes. It's okay.
Okay, then I come back. Thank you, Daphne. So coming back to another aspect, life below water, you might say this is not connected to climate change. It is, because only if the oceans are ecologically in a proper condition we are able to assist and to co-function with the climate system. Therefore, and also for the supply of oxygen, we definitely need intact and functioning oceans. So again, if you think about what is the usual way, if we talk about life below water and we want to express that we do have a global challenge, it is either a picture like this from the beach, which is heavily polluted with plastics, or if you go underwater, you often find pictures like these, often photoshopped. And again, you stress and you focus on the sorrows, the negative emotions of the students, probably thinking that you bring them into a different kind of handling or even solution-oriented activities, but that would not work. So here my alternative is, that is an award which is called in German Jugend forscht. That means youth is researching. And we do have this award every year. And a young girl, who is only 18 years old, she was informed, or she got informed that the majority of the microplastic pollution of the oceans come from the washing processes in the washing machines. And her idea is, and was, and still is, I'm going to develop a filter which holds about 90% of the microplastic parts back out and do not get them into the sewage and therefore into the rivers and finally into the oceans. That was highly accepted and appreciated by the jury, so that she got the second prize of this award in this year 2022. Again, also this idea you do have to counter with questions like, is the idea transferable? Is it financeable? Can this filter clean the oceans from plastic or not? And now I come back to this and try to summarize. Problems and problems and problems are obviously the culture, the teaching culture in many parts of the world. And you won't be surprised that I suggest forget about this. Let's better start something like this, a solution-focused approach where we add ideas of solutions after idea of solutions to each other and finally ask, okay, these are not the final solutions. They can only solve a step, but we are already in a mood of solution-oriented thinking. And therefore we ask finally how to cope with the remaining problem. And students are much more open-minded to address such a question and develop a lot of creativity if we turn it around like that. So bring it back into this theoretical approach. I can skip that, bringing us into the question of, does that give or supply a kind of contribution to ESD for 2030 and to the SDGs? Definitely, because to reach them, we do need a lot of heureka. We do need a lot of creativity and new ideas, since we do have to go an alternative way, and no longer in the kind or in that processes which we did in the last 250 years, at least not concerning environment pollution. Solution process teaching is finally walking a fine line. So on the positive side, you see it offers perspectives, it strengthens and fosters anticipatory thinking, creativity, critical thinking, systems thinking. It motivates, and if everything works fine, it even activates. But you should not forget that on the negative side, on the other side of the fine line, we see that there might be some people who have a kind of blind belief in technology. They might belittle the real dimensions and urgency of global changes. They might even strengthen their carelessness and inactivity. That you also have to take into consideration. But to sum it up, you do have to find a way. And for me personally, especially because I always see our two sons, from a pedagogical and a didactic point of view, it is a better way And I'm very keen to discuss these ideas with you in the next 60 minutes. Thank you very much for your attention so far from my side, and over to Daphne again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas. It was very, very, very interesting. Before we will have some comments and questions, I forgot to ask you to write in the chat, where are you located in and where are you from? We always like to do that, and to see how many places we have in the session. So if you can say hi from where are you staying, we'll be happy. And also, Oren, if you can put in the chat the link to the, we have all the recording of the other sessions, and then everyone could hear and could see and could go back to this lecture. So if you have any question for now to Thomas or comment, we will be happy to hear. Just jump in if you can. India, wow, nice. Taiwan.
I have a question.
Okay.
Yes, a question. Yes, Gail.
So I was thinking about this idea of like focusing on solutions instead of on problems. And I guess my question is, like, I tend to start with the problem to like teach the content of the problem. Like, if I'm going to talk about renewable energy, I need them to understand first, you know, what are fossil fuels, what are the problems with fossil fuels, and then I sort of move to solutions. And I guess I hear you saying start from the positive, hook in with positive, but I guess my question is, where do you put in the background of the problem? Like, sort of, how do you sequence things, I guess is my question.
These or the introduction of these the 2 or 3 examples are of course quite short. So the first thing is I start with a positive idea, but I counter this idea already with a kind of thesis, or that somebody claims this is a problem, and then you do have no, so sorry, this should be the solution of problem XY. By example, the energy question or the emissions you are probably going to talk about in your energy aspects or issues. So that means that you start with the solution idea and the claim that this solves the whole thing. This puts the solution into the kind of discussion issue. But what I would like to do is to foster much more on the discussion of solution, to bring students into the position that they are able to assess the quality of a solution idea. And to do that, they of course do have to deal with the problem. But that is not the starting point, because of the psychological moment which I try to present. You do have a very positive atmosphere, which is with a lot of curiosity, bound with a lot of curiosity from the very beginning. You do not neglect the problem, not at all, but you minimize the time you need on the problem to understand it. And the unlucky thing for me is to watch that I see many school textbooks, chapters, lessons to be taught, which are focusing that much on the problem that they hardly have any time to focus or to even to discuss possible solutions. And that is what I would like to turn, because I'm absolutely sure what we do not bring our next generation into the situation to say, okay, in front of me, there is a problem. I'm going to address this problem and how to solve it. But if we have a culture, a teaching culture, that puts the problem into dimensions what you can only react in a kind of resignation, especially as a young person, That is not the message I would like to give to our sons, and also not to their whole, excuse me, to their whole generation. And then dealing with the problems, you finally come, okay, we found out this suggestion with which we started might be a good idea for this and this and this condition, but it does not solve this and this and this. And here the next point starts, as I told you, or as I showed, okay, how do we deal with this problem, with the remaining problem? Now we have the problem, which we are already familiar with here, but we are still in a positive, solution-oriented thinking mood, and are much more able to find creative ways to address these remaining things. And then a final thing might be to put it onto another spatial dimension. So the very beginning is always a very limited idea. It should be fascinating, but it's not yet a kind of global agreement. At the end, you can come and discuss the quality of global agreements, or even the lack of global agreements, which you put into the center of your further teaching. So that is the sequence in general, what you asked. I hope I could answer your question.
That was great. Thank you very much.
Garrett?
Thanks. And thanks for the wonderful chat. So interesting, Thomas.
Thanks.
My question's about the sort of political side of changing things. So I think there's many solutions which we could introduce to help climate change and other sort of threats, but I suppose a bigger problem is that there's no political will to actually put these changes in. So do you have any thoughts on how we can teach students to be solution focused on the political side, you know, the civic side of actually having society put these things into action?
My first association would be media. If you look into the media, you sometimes find interesting articles or which start or which focus a solution. But if you compare it, we are much more on the negative side. So again, this is also just another dimension of a different perception. So write articles, report about them, make awards, future awards, sustainability awards, technology awards, youth awards, much more popular, and try to start discussions on creativity. So, by example, one of the most interesting combinations I ever heard in the last years, that is a new urban transporter which has been developed by Mercedes-Benz. That is an driven by an electric motor, and it is planned, or it is conceptualized only for urban transport. The crucial thing is that in this car there is a filter which cleans urban polluted air, taking it into the car, into a certain filter system, and releases much cleaner air at the end, or in the rear of the car. So that is one of the kind of combinations. A car is in your usual association dirty and polluting, but here it becomes a running filter. So these absolutely unknown, unusual combinations of thinking, if we can bring this into the society and into the civic society, I think we can trigger a process of a kind of creativity move, and that would be, for me, the most or the best we could reach.
Great.
However
Oli?
you do that.
Thank you so much. It was really very nice. And for me,
Thank
it's
you,
like
Marit.
a continuous conversation from Switzerland. So I learned a lot. And I received a good introduction a week ago. I wanted to ask two questions. You can choose which one you want to answer first. The first one is that from Earth system approach, the basic is Earth. It's the Earth systems. And solution or problems are very much focused on the human dimension, the anthropocentric aspect. And for example, I study agriculture and I really like the example that you gave, but I wonder where fit in the biogeochemical cycles. Where will you put it in your pedagogic agenda? This is.
Can I answer directly, all right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I would probably also choose the approach via the SDGs and go via SDG 15, which gives life on land, including the sphere of the soils. And that is the first step of the geobiochemical flows in the whole Earth system. So I would probably start here and then look for some good examples how to get involved that. What happens? I must say that I have no clear example for that case yet, because the natural flows are okay, which we could demonstrate. But everything else what we do is negative in this sense. So probably you can only narrow this or adjust this idea in a kind of limited thing, or storing or processing some of the flows in another way. By example, if you think about the storage of CO2 in basalt rocks or something like that, maybe like this. I'm not ready about this, but thanks for the idea to think about that as another example. That is probably worth to deal with that. Sorry for not giving a complete
okay.
answer
Thank
for
you.
that.
I just think that adding dimension of complexity through biogeochemical cycle that you put in the background of the phenomenon under inquiry can help to show also the more not anthropocentric point of view of the SDGs that I admit I have problem with this framework from the beginning because it's so focused on human dimension, I admit. And I also wanted to ask you from and about the SDGs in this relationship, that it's all about content, the phenomenon, but it does not show learning environment. So are you combine a layer of learning environment on your wonderful examples?
What I do is that I deal with the SDG before I start with that. And I want the students to understand that we do have quite a number of dilemmata in these SDGs. So nobody can explain how to combine successfully SDG 9, further industrial growth, with SDG 15 or 14. It simply does not work. And you will find further combinations where you simply have to say it does not fit. That is one point. The other point is, you said there is not environment. That is very interesting. Some months back, 1.5, 2 years back, I was thinking, I should do something about culture. For sure, there is something. I was so much astonished that you do not find culture considered in the SDGs or in the 2030 agenda. And recently I wrote an article which is about the phenomenon of SDG 18. That is so interesting. If you Google SDG 18, you will find numerous 20, 30 different initiatives which try to extend and to review the Agenda 2030. And that is exactly probably also in the direction your thoughts are. And I often say probably this is nothing else but a kind of preparation for Agenda 2050, which will definitely come. because we will the 2030 agenda goals will definitely not be reached in 8 years. Yeah, and therefore that would be a very good discussion to to review and also to extend or even to change the dimensions or the levels of abstract where you place the goals, and whether you bring it into a higher complexity even, and then we are probably with your ideas on the way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Shai?
Thank you so much for this presentation.
Just a minute, Shai and Sheila, you will be the last, okay? Because we want to move to the small groups discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this particular presentation because it makes me think about how some solutions of climate change are taken for granted. Like when we say renewable energy, sustainable energy, as if that's the end point, but we don't think about the solutions, the problems of the solutions. And I guess this is a good way of bringing these. But I have another question, which is like the teacher in me talking, where in the classroom we have students of different capabilities and different types of intelligence. And maybe creativity is not at the same level for everyone. So how do you think that you can deal with this different level of capabilities in the classroom with this kind of orientation? And how do you view this solution-oriented approach at the different levels of like the vertical progression?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To start with the latter aspect, of course, it is you can increase the progression with more and more complex and technically more sophisticated or more complex solution suggestions. That is always possible to arrange these. So that is not a real problem. So by example, in the lower class, I have an example of a family which is living around here, and the husband for his 50th anniversary, he said, I do not want to have any gifts beside the fact that in total I would like to get 50 different kinds of trees which I'm going to plant on my meadow. And that is my contribution towards to biodiversity. So that is a very simple example which can immediately be understood. And if you look to the various suggestions, or remember the white roof movement which came up in the big US cities or metropoles from Chicago to New York, that is quite simple. So there is no problem to arrange that according to different degrees of complexity. The other thing is I would like to say back the same way as you deal with the problems. So if you have students of different capabilities, you always have to differentiate whether you talk about problems or whether you talk about solutions. There is no difference. You deal with that you send those who are really capable and creative I would like to say, on their own, and those of whom you know they need some assistance, you take into your corner and you explain it again and again and try. Do you have ideas? And you try again, or you explain another step and then try again. But do not think that there might be no creativity at all. So it's an attempt which you do have to experience in each learning group again and again. But I do not see that it is a real hurdle.
Right, thank you. Sheila?
Thank you.
We can't hear you.
Okay, so you can hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Thomas. I really enjoy your presentation, and especially the solution-oriented teaching, and that's really encouraging for me. Let me explain briefly. The project that I'm doing right now, or the article that I'm writing right now, is about environmental justice in an area in Kaohsiung, the city, but the area used to be a harbor city, and the harbor township. And because, you know, the national economic development needs, and so the entire village has been transformed to a very heavy industrial park and industrial landscape. And so over decades, like the governments tell people that we want to make this become a very developmental area. We'll give you schools, we'll give you hospitals, we'll give you department stores, so on and so forth. And actually they take the farming lands and the beautiful seashores away to build an industrial park. And it's really kind of environmental justice issues, and also, you know, the residents, the health equity has been taken away, and so on and so forth. And, you know, this kind of topic, I use this as a real case and a real scenario for students to understand what the struggle between economic development and justice issues. And this kind of struggle, and I just try to imagine if I use the solution-oriented curriculum to help students think about how people would face the real dilemma between economic development and health, or residential justice, or environmental justice as a whole. How would you put it? How would you tell students, well, think about, we don't need that kind of development, but we just want to have our health back? It's, you know, how do you deal with it? How would you design a curriculum that helps students to think while not really suffer the economic growth? Thank you.
I got it. Thank you. That is, yeah, finally a very political question. Probably I would, I just speak into the unclear now, but at least I would like to tell you some associations or some ideas which come up, or which came up while you were explaining. Probably I would look for an example of a village or a settlement where people definitely have healthy life conditions. And then I would compare and say, okay, is this the problem of the country, of the area, or whatever? And the students will probably find out there is a big benefit concerning health, individual health, but there is probably some negative aspect concerning economic, by example, income, or the economic base, or the amounts or the dimensions of entertainment and of standard of living, and so on. And then I would make them develop ideas. How can you get the best out of both? Is it possible to combine healthy conditions, environment conditions, with a minimum of prosperity, or whatever? You will definitely have a situation that the judgment of your students will be extremely different. And that you simply do have to accept, because that is the reality in which we live. We do have both intentions, because some say economic success is more, or is more important than my individual health, that is my risks. And others say exactly the opposite. And to make this, or to put this into the center of the students' discussion, including some concrete examples which might have a real advantage on this or this or this aspect. whether it is health or income or whatever, and always compare and say, okay, what is the price for this? What is the price for this? What is the price for this? And finally, I come to my individual and finally also collective stand or position. And then I think that schooling also ends, because everything else is a question of citizenship. That is what, or how I would start to think about, and then see how far I come, or whatever will come into my mind.
Thank you so much. I
You're
think
welcome.
about this again. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So thank you, Thomas. And we are now, we'll break out to rooms, and we have two questions that Thomas suggested for us for the discussion. I will share with you the questions. So Thomas, do you want to explain your questions?
Can you increase it a bit? I always have problems with reading.
Yeah, I will. Just a minute. Can you see?
Yeah, now it's fine. What is motivating you? Reflect on the impact of negative and positive trends or signals on your well-being and readiness to act. So that is a kind of psychological aspect. Think about on your own. Are you ready to get active because somebody told you about dangers, about negative situations which fear you, and due to your fear, you become active? Or did you make the experience for your own, that you are much more motivated if there's somebody who tells you a fantastic story, which you reflect on and you think, hey, that might be really a step into another time, into another future? And how is your position in that? And in the collective discussion, we might get also an idea about the younger generation and which way we should go. Or think again to Martin Luther King. I had a nightmare or I had a dream. That is finally the question which is in the background of that form articulation. And the second one, the pros and cons of a solution focused teaching approach, and develop your own positive position on the issue. What I did with this last slide on the fine line idea, which I showed you. Think about that. What is, maybe I did not cover all the arguments on the pros and cons side, but that is very important to find your own position. As a third one, you could also think about.
Two is enough, Thomas. Two is enough.
Two is enough. Okay.
Yeah, two is enough. We don't have so much time for.
Okay.
So we
keep
will,
that in my secrets.
Yeah. So we will have. I'm putting the questions in the chat now, and you could have the discussion in the groups, and we will come back in about 15 minutes. 20 minutes to close the discussion. So we'll be very happy if you can share with us. Each room could share some thoughts, some ideas that you discussed in the breakout room. Who wants to start? Who is the brave? It's always a quiet moment in this time.
I just want to tell you that for me this time it passed very fast. I think we didn't nail all what we wanted to. I mean, just saying like that it was a time issue for us, maybe that we just reach a little bit of that, and I wish to have more time with my team to grow more what we start talking about the ideas.
So can you give us a small thing about the starting point?
Well, we start knowing each other about what motivates us, and it was a different approach, like personal experience, most of them, points of view about what we have been living. And I don't know if Erica maybe do want to mention your personal motivation, that I think it was very strong.
Sure. Thanks, Janet. I was just sharing kind of like my family personal history. Part of my family is from a very small mining town that's now one of the largest Superfund sites, which is a federal, like a government designation to a place that's untenable in living. And so my family was displaced from there, and growing up with that and experiencing kind of those injustices in a very acute way really has motivated me. And making a comment of, you know, personal experience in different situations that are environmentally, you know, impactful, can be a large motivator for people to search for solutions when they are already presented with the problem. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Erica. The second room, who wants to share? We have 4 rooms, and we saw that you had a maybe short but kind of discussion.
I can say something from our,
yeah.
I don't see now
can-
my colleagues, maybe Kirti want to say something? Yes, please, Rinat.
No, she doesn't. Rina doesn't.
I was waving you. I can say a few things, yes, as long as my kids behind you will be quiet. Well, actually, we were a scientist, a geography teacher, and a kindergarten teacher at the same room. And I was saying that I think, just a second, wait. It's either that or he's gonna die today. Well, I was thinking that I'm better at being a kindergarten teacher, actually. So we were talking about how to see it in a positive way. That for me, it encourages me to think that there is a way and I can solve problems. While I have twins, I'm sorry. That's it. So when you think about the problem, maybe it can be discouraging to think, oh, we have a problem. Well, it's so sad. We can't do anything. But if you look on the positive way, then you can see that you can solve it. And then Orit, which is the scientist, said, well, why look at it as problem and solution? It's not us to decide if it's a problem or solution. Maybe we should look at the things as a phenomenon and then look from that, which is not positive nor negative. So it was a really enlightening way of thinking, that not everything we do as humans reflects on the environment, and the opposite. And maybe Orit can jump in and say exactly what she meant.
I just said that I have a problem with the glorification of the human role using problem or solution, because from complexity point of view, any solution, if you will look on the feedback loops, negative and positive, in time dimension and spatial dimension, will influence differently. And we need to be critiqued about what we define problem or what we define solution. And it doesn't mean we need to exclude those terms. But for me, the first to unpack the scientific mechanism underlying the phenomenon and that you look at, and only then thinking about feedbacks and cycles and see how those are fit with concept of solutions or problems, but not start with it from the beginning.
Thank you very much. What about the third group? Who was in the third group? Darren? Is it you?
It was Shahi and I. Yeah, Shahi, do you want to start and I can pick up?
Yeah, we mainly discussed about the pros and cons, and we discussed about the idea like how this approach may give hope for the students and self-efficacy for them to act, because without that, we can't expect them to act. And the idea of how it kind of shows that there is a connection with their self-interest for them to act. But we also discussed about some challenges related to this. And one of the main ideas Darren was pointing out was like, there is this thin line of focusing on the solution instead of the problem. And he valued also focusing on the problem. Correct me, Darren, or just open, because the main idea is we just don't need to forget the source of the problems and the problems that exist, and not be only solution oriented as a way that we use the students as a way or as a tool for generating solutions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, if you want to add something.
No, that was great. I guess my concern was around kind of over relying on technology to fix problems. And instead of maybe renegotiating our relationships that we've constructed with the planet and nature. So just opening the aperture of what solutions can be. And solutions can be reorganizing our relationships, or activism, or our dispositions and how we behave. I think these are also solutions. So that's really what my interest is coming from. And I think there is something in the logic of problem solution that is very binary in its approach of conceptualizing that one for one piece together. And I think complexity, as others have said, is an important thing to bring in. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. But I thank you so much, Tomas, for your presentation.
Noha was talking about some challenges. If you want to talk about it,
Yeah, thank you. We added during our discussion that it needs integrated teaching for applying the solution-based teaching. I need the mathematics with science and language. And we also added that it's difficult to apply it in the traditional classroom, especially here in Egypt, while we have such a huge ratio of students to teacher. So in practical work, we get out, going out to farms to see the solutions for the problem that's already there in the farms, the solar energy, the management irrigation systems for shortage problems of water here in Egypt. But I can't apply it in the class. It's very difficult. And it needs a lot of resources, financial and human resources. It needs the whole culture of the school to be changed, applied. The administration, they should be oriented to such type of teaching, I think.
Thank you very much for the perspective. Thank you. And the last group, Anne, was you in the last group?
Sure, and I'll invite my colleagues to jump in too. We were very positive, very motivated by the focus on solutions, noting that the focus on problems can be quite overwhelming in multiple contexts. One of the things we talked about was the fact that solutions frame a problem in a particular way so that solution is successful within that problem. And so helping students understand, sort of unpacking what is this solution actually a problem to? And what are the other ways of looking at the problem that other solutions might be more appropriate for? We also talked about considering perspectives on equity and social justice and diverse perspectives, whose voices are privileged around this particular solution and who is not, and what could we do to take the solution as an opportunity to expand our way of thinking, to be more inclusive, to be more just, to be more diverse in the ways that we're thinking about the problem and who it's serving and how it's addressing, how that solution is addressing the problem. Does that really quickly capture what we talked about? Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, great recap. Thanks, Anne. I would just add about sort of negativity bias as well, that I think we're hardwired to be pessimistic and negative. That's part of why we've survived. So I think there's an interesting tension between that and this sort of solutions focused thing. I think, yeah, it'd be interesting what we can do, sort of terms of a global culture, how we can move from a negativity bias thing to a more positive way of looking at it. But yeah, otherwise really interesting stuff.
Great. So we have, thank you so much for sharing and for the discussions. And Thomas, we have half a minute if you want to say something for to close.
Yeah, thank you very much for the feedback. That is always very helpful for me also to go on with further thoughts on the approach. I would like, Darren, just to mention 2-3 sentences to what you said with your colleague. You said it's a quite binary concept, but that is also because you need to name it somehow to bring it into the discussion. If you think much deeper about it, you could always say that a solution integrates always with the problem and vice versa. That you can always mention. The other point is you said it is very much technically oriented. That is due to the fact or due to the examples I have chosen. You can go also in the other ways, but then you immediately recognize that you automatically get extremely political. That is probably much more sensitive in a way. And I'm still looking for examples to deal with that. I still guarantee and ensure that the students find their own way and do not get overrun with a position or something like that. That is much more difficult, for sure. And the final thing is, this approach does definitely not work with all topics. It does work with global challenges as the big frame. As I read in the chat also, if you are interested in, I will send via Owen and Daphna some hints for a literature where you can get deeper into the ideas or to reread it and to discuss with this. Thank you very much for your interest and for your valuable feedback.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And we will add the links to articles and more information with the recording in the TC website. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, and hope to see you next time in our workshop.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you. I learned so much.
That's great. Thank you.